Okay, we'll make a start. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on our third event in our Smart Content and Accelerating Digital Transformation event. If you've attended either of the other two sessions, you'll know that we're really all about trying to provide inspiration to help you mine your content repositories and build smarter content. Many of you who are existing MarkLogic customers, so we hope that you're going to get more value out of the tech you've already got in your stack. And for those of you that are new to MarkLogic, we hope there's some interesting conversations that you'll perhaps dive a little deeper on. Do feel free to use the chat feature at all if you've got any questions. You can either put them out to everyone, or if you'd rather position them directly to Phil Miller, you can do that, and we'll collect them all up and we'll go through a Q&A session towards the end. We'll also be keeping an eye on social media. If you're interested in that, we can tag us in. And finally, this is the third of three events. So for those of you that weren't here before, you know, there's some catching up to do. We had two previous events. The first one was focused around taxonomies and ontologies and the power that they have to transform your content. We heard from Graphify, who they've created a taxonomy and ontology management tool, and it's got a really powerful feature set, but very easy to use. And we also heard from Thierry, OECD, about the different kinds of taxonomies that the OECD create and the value that that brings to their organization. Day two was focused more on semantics and entity extraction and how utilizing semantic features in MarkLogic can provide new capabilities around your data. And we got David in to talk around some of the customers that they've worked with and the work that they've done around semantics. And they also talked about David Rover, which was the platform that they've built on top of MarkLogic that allows you to do entity extraction against your data. SmartLogic also demonstrated Semaphore, which is their ontology management tool, and they talked around the content classifier that they have. And we know there are lots of MarkLogic customers out there who are already making use of SmartLogic. So today's session, you know, we're going to touch on the opportunities that these knowledge graphs present to you. You're going to hear from some people in MarkLogic, some experts that have delivered this kind of technology with existing customers. And you'll also hear from Susie at 67 Bricks, and she's going to talk through the digital transformation that they see in their customers and how they support their customers through digital transformation. So if you've been to one of the other events, you'll recognize this. This is sort of the roadmap that we see of customers moving towards smarter content. And the first couple of events covered sort of points 4 through 6. So now what we want to talk about is those practical use cases for knowledge graphs and the value they can bring. The examples you're going to see from MarkLogic, some of them are live customer use cases. Some of them are demo products that we've built to show off the technology. And others are sort of mock-ups of what you could build with technology that we think would add value. And as this is a journey around content, and we're talking about generating more value from your content, we thought we'd actually talk through a typical content journey. So we touch on sort of the content creation and the content enrichment side of the journey and the repository that sits behind that, but also touch on the consumption side. So what can you do with consumption data and how does that add value back to your content? So let's start right at the beginning, content creation. We have an example here on screen of a structured authoring tool. In this case, it's Fonto, and how it's highlighting terms as you type and allowing you to classify those against the ontology. So if you've got an ontology in the background, you can actually bring those together as you're authoring smart content. You can also ensure that perhaps you're creating a template that forces some of that alignment at the start. So you want to align to a primary high-level term in your ontology, and you can actually then prompt the author to complete more metadata as they're going through the authoring process. So you make sure you hit your standard, but you're also using the ontology to guide that authoring process. Another example we have is to think about how you can break that content down. So rather than doing long form authoring, what we're seeing a lot of our customers look at the moment is how they can break content down into smaller content objects. So think of the lowest level piece of content that adds value to a consumer and is practical to author and to enrich. So typically going down to a single paragraph is unlikely to be beneficial. It takes too much time to index and to author at that level. But perhaps you're going to bring together a few paragraphs, maybe an illustration, that brings together a valuable piece of content for a consumer. And if you start to author content or you tag content into these chunks, you actually start to open up some other opportunities about how you're going to do that. So here we've got a piece of content that's brought together. It's around an assessment and a learning objective on this example. And on the right-hand side, we've actually said, okay, slide us around, enter some values, and we can pick some objectives that this piece of content meets. So we've aligned the content with the objective. And that means we can now navigate and look for all the content that meets these objectives in different areas. And another way that we add value is that if you've got this library of richly tagged smarter content, you can begin to leverage it in different ways. So the panel here on the right could become a search across your smart content, where you can drag and drop elements into your content as you're authoring it. So here we've got an example where, I don't know, we're going to create a new piece of content around volcanoes, and we've aligned that to our ontology as we started to create it. Now, because we've got a library of content already aligned to the ontology, as we do that on the right-hand side, we could pre-populate and pre-filter the search box and say, okay, I'm going to create some content on volcanoes. Show me all the content I've already got that aligns to that ontology term, to that concept. And I could then drag in text, assessments, images, whatever it might be. And I can actually even, instruct an author to say, I want you to go and create a new piece of content on Egyptian sarcophaguses. Go and see all of the content, the images we already have, and actually write some content around the images that we've had. So we don't have to research them, we don't have to clear them again. All of that work's already done up front. So it's a new way of reducing cost, making good use of reuse, and presenting it at the authoring stage. And this is sort of an example of that. For those that have been to the other events, we touched on the Walter's Claw search that talks back example, and we'll mention it again a bit later. But here you can actually see the editing screen. So we've got some text here in the green section that's been broken down. So you can see the tags within inside the content, and we can choose any one of those elements to enrich. So in this case, they chose the table with all the figures and the numbers in it. And then up pops the ontology tool that says, okay, where do you want to align that piece of content so that it can be found during search? Another example here, going back to the DataVid rover that we were talking about earlier. What if you don't have a structured authoring tool? What if you've just got a huge wealth of historical content that you want to mine and enrich? Well, then you can turn to the entity enrichment and content classification tools that we were talking about on day 2. So here, DataVid took a whole bunch of articles from PubMed, and they actually analyzed all of that content for entities. And some of it was trained using machine learning against the PubMed data, and some of it was through alignment to ontologies. So you can do various different ways of finding those entities through the product. And if you look at the example here, it's pulled out various different types of entities. You can see there's dates, and they're not just, 12th of March. They're actually things like, mid-1900s or early this. So you can actually pull out dates that are quite loosely formed. You can also look up locations, people, chemicals, diseases, all sorts of things. And if you remember Thierry from OECD, he was also talking about the semantic analysis tools that they built to read and understand content. And they use the ontologies there to actually provide the detailed information to classify the content. So they're looking through the content, using the ontology to work out how they should classify it. And they actually define the rules around disambiguation inside their ontology. So they could use the ontology to make a decision whether this piece of content should be tagged with this concept or whether to ignore it because it had stop words in there. So say, okay, we understand in this context, we don't want to tag it. Really interesting presentation. That do go back and see that one. Another option here is, talking about aligning a piece of content. So here we've got an abstract from an article. We've pulled out our concept and we've linked it to an ontology. And in this case, it's a medical term, and therefore it can link to standard medical taxonomies like MESH. And here we've gone over to MESH, we've pulled in an explanation for Hodgkin's, and we've also gone to DBpedia and pulled in some primary data from there. So we're doing very little work. We've taken a piece of content, we've identified an entity, we've aligned it to an ontology, we've gone out to external sources and pulled in valuable information and displayed it to a user. So we've enriched their user and search experience just by linking to an ontology concept and pulling that data in. Another way of turning this on its head is to use entity extraction in a slightly different way. So this is a use case we're working through with a customer at the moment, where we're taking an archive of medical data and we're actually using entity extraction to identify personal information in a document and redact it. So we're finding doctors' names, patients' names, email addresses, phone numbers, finding all of that information and redacting it from the content. So content that was going to be lost as it contained personal information and couldn't be shared can now be richly shared and analyzed and used throughout the organization. And using MarkLogic's redaction features, you can actually leave the text in place if you want to, and just protect it from anyone seeing it. So you can lock it down using the security features within MarkLogic. This is a really nice example that I think is a bit underrated, that if we align our content to our ontologies, we can actually start to get insights about the breadth of content we have and where we're going to put our investment. So if you consider that there may be key areas in your domain that you're interested in. So there may be high frequency searches from your website, it may be emerging topics, it may just be areas that you know your customers are interested in. If you've aligned your content to the ontology, you can start to say, well, actually, how many pieces of content do I have in my different content categories around those topics? Where have I got gaps in my knowledge that I don't have, a fact sheet on this particular term in this particular language? And that's where you can then go and invest your time. You know there are terms and areas that people are interested in, and now you have a vision over where you've actually got your content and how it's spread and where you need to invest to fill gaps. I think content alignment and content analysis is a key factor. This example looks more at the data mining aspect. So here we've got a manual around a car repair, and we've gone through and we've done our entity extraction. We've built our knowledge graph in the background that says, in this particular car model, in this particular job, we know we need these particular parts. Well, actually, we can go off and look in our parts database using our knowledge, using MarkLogic semantic relationships to go and pull that data in and say, we know that because you're doing a MGB 1976 and you're looking at this particular part of the manual, you'll need these parts to complete that job. And we can go and do a stock check and a price check, and you can go and add those to a basket. So don't just consider the content and the relationship to an ontology, but consider the data that sits inside that content as well, and how you can pull that out with MarkLogic and even expose it as SQL for Power BI tools or SQL queries. This is a great example that we keep coming back to, the Walters Floor search that talks back. And this is mentioned on the last couple of events. I'm not going to spend long on it, but as you saw on that previous screen, we had some content where we marked up the piece of content, the segmented content to an ontology. And you can see here the search results. So users typed in auto costs. It's pre-populated that from the ontology. It's then prompted them with the next level of terms from the ontology. and they've keyed in the word percentage, and it's taken them exactly to the right piece of content on the search result. So they don't even have to go into the document. Visualizing entities. I think this is one of the key areas that most people think about when they think of a knowledge graph, in that you can take a piece of content, do your entity extraction, and build a nice web of how all those things come together. I'm not going to spend very long on this because I know we've got some demos, live demos coming up later that will show that in a lot more detail. So this was the last example that I wanted to touch on. We've covered a lot of use cases in the content creation and the repository stage and the enrichment stage of the content journey. But we can also use that knowledge graph when we're looking at consumption data too. And I think content creators often have a limited visibility of what happens to their content when it gets published. So here what we've done is we've got the concept of these content objects. We've structured them into some sort of product and published it, in this case to a website. And this is an assessment. So we say, well, this assessment should be a pretty difficult assessment for someone to complete. It goes off into the ether and gets published. But now we can actually pull back some aggregated consumption data and say, well, we saw that people have completed that assessment and it took them a lot less time than we expected, and they got a lot higher score than we expected. So therefore, something we consider difficult is actually proving too easy. So we can now go away and rework that piece of content or create new content to challenge those people. So a really interesting way of taking consumption data back into your content creation process. And that's where I'm going to hand over to Michael. And Michael's going to talk you through more on that direct to consumer and the consumption data in this journey. So Michael, over to you.
All right, so direct to consumer, this is an idea that's been around for quite a while. I mean, we've all heard phrases like "have it your way" or "the customer is always right," but it's accelerating over the years, and there's reasons for that, because there's this shift in the power to consumers across pretty much every industry. So if you look at retail, you know, I'm showing my age here, but way back when I was growing up, there weren't that many cereals or footwear that you could buy. If you go into your basic grocery store today, you can, just on the cereal aisle alone, you've got probably 100 or more choices. And this is a running store, superstore, where you got all these different shoes that you can buy. Same thing in healthcare. Pulled a little amusing picture of a doctor, but today, not that you could go and get surgery at a Minute Clinic, but you can walk into many of these, some of these stores and get some services done where in the past you'd have to wait for a doctor, get an appointment. Same thing in travel. I'm out here in California, and if you want to go from Los Angeles to San Francisco, look at the times there, pretty much every 45 minutes and relatively inexpensive. So shift in power in these three industries. Same thing in education. We've got great schools, but if you just want to go online, you could go to MIT and get pretty much all their courses, or a good chunk of their courses. Insurance, we've all seen those amusing commercials, and in finance, you know, that world is being turned upside down, and you can see the shift in power. You've probably witnessed what went on with GameStop in the last month. So that was very interesting. Now, why do enterprise want to go direct to consumer? Well, because it's all about customer engagement. That's that long tail, getting to know your customer, giving them what they want. And enterprises, they want to own the data, particularly in media and publishing. There was a time when the big content providers like Disney and Warner Brothers and Sony and Paramount, they lost a little bit of that with the emergence of companies like Netflix. They inserted themselves right in the middle, and the real live data, the important data, was going through their platform, their application. So now you see, with the advent of Disney Plus, HBO Max and Paramount Plus and all that information is coming back to the content providers. So they want to own that data so that they can develop deeper relationships with the buyers. They want to keep you engaged. And this helps their products and their operations, so they can cut costs. They can control their brands, what people are saying about them, which is probably their most important asset. Some other reasons is that the competitors are out there. They've got competition. Everyone is trying to get hold of that consumer, understand what they want. Another reason is that you can do that. Today, technology is making it very possible, whether it's in manufacturing or artificial intelligence, you can really get down and understand what your customers want and how to deliver it to them in a cost-effective way. Make a profit. In media and entertainment, they used to, and they still do, they have these tentpole type products where they get a big portion of their revenue, but now more and more a portion of revenue is coming from these smaller projects, so these smaller pieces of content and assets. And of course, the customers want it. They know that they're not stuck with one provider, whether it's content or some kind of service, and it's just the nature of what's going on in the industry, and it's a good thing. So how do you achieve direct to consumer? Well, this is a little equation that I came up with, and I tried to make it look a little scientific, but essentially direct to consumer means know your product, and know your customers. So that's the KYP, KYC. These terms have been around for a while. And, and I put this scientific summation here because you want to know as much as you can from 0 to infinity. So what's happening now specifically in the world of content providing media and entertainment? So this is, I'm out in Los Angeles. We work with the studios like Disney and Warner Brothers and Sony. And most of them, if not all of them, are getting into knowing their product. And one way they're doing it is with this descriptive metadata tagging. So you see some popular talent here, some titles that you may be aware of. They're tagging this content frame by frame, second by second, with all this descriptive metadata. And I've captured some of them, but there's probably well over 100 different attributes or more that they want to know what's going on in this particular moment of time with this asset that they have. And why do they want to do that? So that they can search on it. In the past, they used to have to put interns in a room and say, go find me a picture of this particular actor or actress in a love scene or a fight scene or a chase scene. And it would take some time. Now, by tagging these assets, they could pull it up very, very quickly and use that for either new product introduction or new media introduction, or specifically to license, to generate revenue out of content that they've had going back, in Disney's case, close to 100 years. And this information is out there, not just within their archives, but in other archives, and it's coming in through social media, et cetera. So there's a lot of information out there that they want to capture. And the way they're doing this is just a simple example. They've got the information in document format. Some of it's in relational database if it comes from operational, but this is an example of a graph format or a semantic format. So here we're picking Tom Cruise. He's an actor, it appears in these different titles, there's a director. And if you want to get information about, okay, what movies did Tom Cruise appear in, or who was the director of those movies, you could find these relationships and traverse these graphs and get exactly what you want for whatever purpose. This is another interesting way that content is being provided, whether it's in movies or videos or even news organizations. It's a time-based allotment of these keywords and this metadata along a particular timeline. So for instance, in a particular scene, right, what keywords are we looking for? What themes occurred at a particular time in a movie? What locations and where were they? What actors and what were they saying? This is very, very, it's another dimension in helping you to find the asset or the particular scene that you want in this case. and deliver it to a licensee or just to help you develop a new product. Here's a sort of a prototype of an application that we built, where a customer or wanted to search on particular asset. In this case, it was Eat, Pray, Love. They were looking for scenes where I forget what the keywords were in this, where they were finding food or a romantic scene, and you could find the exact timeline, exact place within the timeline where these things occur, where this search criteria was satisfied. And the red and the green in this case signified what was licensable, what was cleared, what rights were available at the particular time, or whether or not they could license this product. So it was a very powerful application internally. So that's know your product. Whether it's the static information or the dynamic information along a timeline. But now you get to know your customer. What are some of the things you want to know about your customer? Well, things like gender and race and ethnicity and what's their income. Religion might be something, education level, where are they, and what their age is. This is static information. It's information you collect when a customer that you're engaged with fills out a form, right? It does, sometimes it changes, sometimes it doesn't, but it's that basic information you have about the customers. But there's also the dynamic information. And with technology today, particularly with mobile devices and tracking, clever technology, you can know what did your customer just tweet, right? Gives you an idea about what their sentiment is. Did they make a comment on Facebook or some kind of post? Did they just click a like button on something that you posted or somebody else posted? If you got them in your streaming app, you might be able to, did they rewind a scene and you know what that scene is? What are they buying? Their purchase history, very, very important to how you're going to serve that customer directly. What websites are they visiting? And what are they reading? You know, Kindle apps, they may be able to detect that information. What are they watching on TV? So this is dynamic information that if you're a content provider, might give you an opportunity to slip something in, whether it's an advertisement or just a recommendation. Or move product if you're a retailer, or develop a new product if you could do it that quickly in manufacturing. And sounds crazy, but that's happening today, where you can manufacture things very, very quickly and get new products out there. Oh, I forgot this one with geospatial. Where are they going? We've all heard that walking by a restaurant, your phone buzzes and you hear about a special that's going on. So this is all cool things that are happening with this information. And when you have it categorized, organized, tagged, you could start asking these very powerful queries about your content. So I won't read through this, but it talks about finding movies, and this particular one is time-based here, where certain things have happened. And these are questions that you couldn't ask about your data and your information not too long ago, but today you can. So we're coming to the end here, but this is something pretty common. What do you do with this information? What are enterprise doing with it? Well, they're analyzing it. In many cases, they're not just using BI tools, but they're starting to get into machine learning. And these are just some major classifications of machine learning. If you know the attributes and you've got a regression type model, you can actually calculate what you think is going to happen. If you want to group people, you'll do classification if you know your various groups. If you don't know your groups, you might move to some unsupervised learning and do a clustering algorithm. So it's just a graphic to show how enterprises are organizing their data and the tools they're using to make sense out of it. And then, beyond direct to consumer, they're using the information they gain out of their data and the insights they're gaining for various use cases. So how does it impact their operations? What could they do with their logistics and routing if they're a manufacturer or a distributor? What kinds of things could they recommend to their consumers? How do they control access to their information And then in other cases like Homeland Security or insurance, they're doing fraud analysis. And then just digging into the social network and so that they can better serve their customers. So very powerful use cases and service that can be delivered by getting hold of this information. And wrapping it up, I think if you've been to the sessions before, you probably saw this diagram that MarkLogic. This is the data hub pattern, and just refreshing your memory. This information is coming in upstream from many sources, and I only have a few of them here. It could be streams, it could be relational database systems, social media, enterprise applications. And with MarkLogic, the information is brought in as is. You can look at it, you can curate it, and then you make it available downstream in a variety of ways. And we talked about companies using machine learning to get insights into what their customers are doing, what they want, how to beat the competition, how to just lead the pack, and then BI tools to look at that data, just do basic KPI type things, and then run. This is observing the business, and then there's actually running the business, just serving your customers, whether it be web applications or transactions. So that's it. If there are any questions, obviously be happy to answer them, but hopefully this kind of gave you an idea of how customers or enterprises are using this information to get a more intimate engagement with your customers that they call direct to consumer.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. It was really interesting. Okay. So next we're going to hand over to Imran. Again, if you've got any questions on this, we can go through them in the Q&A session towards the end. Next we're going to hand over to Imran Chowdhury, who is a specialist in the life science and pharma space, MarkLogic. And he's actually going to run through some applications that we've built in MarkLogic that show the power of semantics. So Imran, I will hand over to you and take us through.
So I want to set a little bit of context for the first demo, and then after that, I'll just say that all of the other contexts are very much related to the semantics and content that we've talked about. Yes, it's healthcare and life sciences related, but it is very much in line with the topic of the series here. So pharmaceuticals are having a really hard time developing drugs. So R&D is a big problem for them. And, it can take billions of dollars and lots of years to develop a drug these days. So they need to find ways to find their content, share their content, do discovery, not lose the knowledge that has been gained through years and years of testing across different types of drugs and solutions. So those are the sorts of challenges that our research hub that makes full use of semantics can help with. On the underlying IT side, the data that's needed for research and development is very wide in range and complex in sort of its variability in formats, right? So these are some major IT challenges that exist. The first demo that we'll talk about and show you is the Pharma Research Hub, which is essentially a single pane of glass that gives you access to a wide range of what I will call business objects. And so without further ado, we'll flip over to the demo side of the puzzle. And I'll go to full screen here. So flipping over to the Pharma Research Hub, what we've done in this particular case is we've brought in publications, we've related them through semantics to authors, we've related them through semantics to drugs and genes and proteins and studies, and then we created a special object in the application itself, which is called a workspace, which is we will allow the users who are looking at this data to discover data that they like and to create workspaces that they can either use to influence what else they will find or share it with their colleagues. So think of workspaces as kind of the ability to do a LinkedIn-like search across the users, where the users are telling the system what they are interested in. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go to publications, and I'll also pick up a workspace that is relevant to the demo here. So I'm going to go ahead and pick, let's just do ACE2 proteins here. Now, first thing to notice is that the view in the middle here changed based on the type of business object. So that's context is very important when you're doing searches, and intent is also very important when you're doing searches. And this lets users look at content in specific ways that we know that the user want to see that. Also, if you notice on the left-hand side, the selection criteria that is offered is also very custom and also changed when I clicked on publications. So I might say, okay, I want to look for content here, the most recent content. So I could come over here and maybe select something recent here. And then I could also say, well, I'm also looking for highly cited documents, because they're probably more relevant to the kinds of searches that I'm interested in doing. And then, I could slice and dice by authors, or I could slice and dice by different journals or institutions, right? So those are also available to me. In this particular case, what we did is we brought in COVID-related publications, and ACE2 is highly correlated to COVID research. So I'm going to go ahead and then just search through this, and I ended up with 61 results. And in this case, we can note that, okay, if I'm searching for diabetes or searching for these, I can look at the list view, but I also have the ability to look at the relationships that we were able to extract from the data based on the business objects that we have. And so now I'm going to go ahead and click on this and let it do a query and bring up the top most related searches here. And I may be logged out, but we'll see. Live demos, right? Okay, so I was able to do the query, and if I zoom out quite a bit, I can see that I have sort of clusters of relationships going on. Another really interesting thing that happens when you look at relationships is you can see that there are sort of co-occurring objects between different clusters that get mentioned, and usually towards the center of these type of graphs, you end up with objects that are more related to the system than not to more of the return results, right? So one thing I can look at is these different icons mean different things. So I can, for example, look at a publication. Over here, I can see authors. Here, I can see proteins, and I can see genes, and I can see a shared gene here. I might want to say, okay, let's bookmark this particular gene because it's occurring in more than a few spots, and then I could add that to my workspace. So I could come over here and say, this particular gene is likely related to this topic, and then I could go ahead and add that. The interesting thing about workspaces, let's go back, is that workspaces can be used to inform, and let's go back to the list view here. The graph view tends to take a little bit of time. Workspaces can be used to inform the searches that we're doing and the relevancy of the searches. Okay, so all right. What I've done is I basically took off the highly cited, and what I wanted to show you here is right now in this ACE2 proteins workspace, if I click on the workspace itself, I can see the proteins and genes that I gathered up in this particular workspace. If I were to go ahead and run that same search, now I can see I have 13 results for the particular search that I did. And you can see novel variants and development of validation of LCMS and genetically modified. But if I were to say, okay, I want to do the same ACE2 search, but I want to look at items that are related to heart attack. Now I get a lot more data back at me, and I get different items as showing up as the top level data sets. And that's because the workspace has a lot of things that inform the search that I need to be looking at, the things that are more correlated to the things that I'm interested in. So these are some examples of using graphs and search and relevancy all together with items of interest from various business objects that were brought into the system. The other thing I can really rapidly show you, let me just get rid of the search here. Is to, let's go back and go to drugs here and just go to regular search. Is to just show you the different views that we have, right? So we saw the publication view already. Here's the author view, and you can see the author view is different, and you can see on the left hand side what I can select and slice and dice that data by is different. The drug view looks like the drug, its active ingredients. The gene view gives you an overview, a gene card, and alternative names, and the protein view gives you different information that's very specific to proteins. And lastly, the study view shows you all the kinds of things that you might want to do with studies in terms of slicing and dicing. So next I'm going to move to another semantics demo that is pretty interesting. It's very simple, very easy to understand. So let's say I'm a patient and I log into a system and I'm looking for a provider. And this occurs all the time, right? Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to purposefully turn off semantics and say, hey guys, let's just use the system without the graph, right? And now if I were to come in and say, I'm experiencing a rapid pulse rate. And if I go ahead and type that search in, within 30 miles, I'm doing a geospatial search as well of this area, I get nothing. I might Google it and figure out that that's tachycardia, right? And I might go ahead and search for tachycardia, and without semantics, again, I get nothing. I might further realize that, this is probably related to the heart, and cardiologists are probably what I should look at. So cardiologist is what I search for, and I end up with 5 hits in my geo area, right? So let's zoom back in again here, and we don't see a lot, right, in my geospatial area. So now let's turn semantics on and rerun those same searches and see the difference. So here now, what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a semantics graph of diseases, specialists that treat those diseases, and symptoms that are related to those diseases, right? So now when I just start typing rapid, it goes, oh, I have a concept that matches rapid pulse rate. And so it brings it up, and I don't have to type it. So it saves on typing. And I got 150 hits, right? Not 5. I could have just done the same thing from a disease perspective if I knew the disease I was looking for, tachycardia, there it is, and I get the exact same results. So 1 is you get consistency, 2, you get a lot more intelligence in terms of the intent of the user if you can understand and leverage the graphs that we have here. The other thing I would like to show you is another view here where we brought in the same data actually and tagged it against various types of information. Just to give you a really quick view of the type of data that we brought into this demo, we've got more than a dozen pieces of data, like 4 different kinds of patient data, ICD-9 data, 4 different kinds of drug data, provider data, structured product labels, FDA adverse events, tweets, and diabetes, right? All extremely different formats that are being used together in the demo that we're showing you here. So here, if I were to come in and search for a drug, let's just go for Zometa and do that sort of drug search, I end up with 59 results, which is fine, but maybe that's not my intent. Maybe what I want to do is look for all the chemicals related, brand names and generics related to the drug of Zometa. And if I run that search, now I've got 1,800 results. And yet again, maybe that's not what I want to do. Maybe I want to look for all of the drugs in the same class as Zometa. And if that's what I'm going to search for, then I'm going to end up with over 1,900 results, right? And so this system appears very smart in terms of its recall, but under the hood, what's happening? What are we doing here? So I'm going to expand the query and see what we actually searched for when we typed this in and had these two checkboxes checked off is a lot of different tokens and a lot of different kinds of things in the database, right? How did we do this? Well, if I go back to my sources and look, one of the sources that we brought in was RxNorm. RxNorm in this particular instance that we brought in had 3.5 million graph relationships. And basically what I did is when I sat down with my developer to develop this demo, I just looked at the graph and the relationships and said, this relationship, the equivalent of has brand name or has generic, is the one I want you to use to find these everything related to this drug. And then for the drugs in the same class, all we did is we said, let's go to the parent object and find all of the children of the parent object, right? So that was a two-step graph traversal versus a one-step graph traversal. And that really helped us find data that came back, in a super high recall manner, right? The other thing I want to just show you is an adverse event that we can look at. And so here I've just checked off those. I'm going to drop into the first interesting looking adverse event. And this is another full use of graphs, right? Where we took a lot of different types of graphs and tagged the content based on each of those graphs and then color coded those tags, right? So here, Zometa, yep, okay, that's the product. Oh, by the way, we also have the product label, so we can sort of graph out and jump to the product label itself and look at that data. But then let's look at what the other colors are doing and what the other colors might mean, right? So over here, osteonecrosis is a disease they're finding. Lightheadedness and dry mouth is a procedure. It probably should have been a meta term. But dry mouth might be a procedure too. And then something like, let's go to pulmonary obstructive disease. This is a disease they're finding, and so on, right? So you can see how taking a large body of text and just running it through the ontologies and tagging the data is a very useful way of enhancing that data. And then like in the previous demo, with enhanced data and enhanced intent, you can find data better and reorder the data and present the data to the users in a more compelling manner. Another example of use of ontologies is quite interesting in this demo. And here, what I will do is show you, give you sort of an overview of what this demo does, and then we'll talk about the exciting use of ontology here. What this demo did was it brought in two different kinds of data. It used the semantic models that Michael was talking about and showing to build out and make those two different kinds of data look the same. And then the user interface that we're demonstrating here, and again, this is just showing capabilities and not a full-blown demo, or not a full-blown product, takes advantage of the fact that both of those different kinds of data are now looking the same, and we can process them through the same user interface and work with them as if they were the same kind of data. In this particular case, what this is set up to do is to help researchers find different kinds of patients with different conditions, and we have the same drug expansion capabilities that I showed earlier, so I won't bother showing that. But but we also have the ability to say, I want to look for a condition and a drug together and race and ethnicity together. And I want to be able to save that information. So here's an example of a saved query that we did. And we were keeping, in addition to the data itself, we're keeping metadata about the data. So who created this query? When did they create this query? What was the starting number of patients? What was the first query narrowing point? What was the second query narrowing point? And also what happens when new data comes into the system? In this particular case, we noted that there are 16 new data elements that came, patients that essentially came in since we marked this as red, right? So these are all sort of metadata sets that we can keep about the data. The other thing that I'm going to show you next is this way of using a taxonomy in a broad manner. So here we brought in the ICD-9 codes and we tagged all of the patients with those codes. Let's say I wanted to go in and find all patients with cancer. So if I click this token here, I'm picking not just 140 or 239 or looking at a range. I'm actually looking for every single item that was found within the patient population that is a sub-hierarchy of all of these of the category of cancer, right? So in fact, as you can see, as I'm navigating down to each of these, I'm finding narrower and narrower sets, and I'm finding individual patients that had that particular subclass of that disease, right? So this is yet another way of very, very nicely managing ontologies and searching through them to create to find the right patients that you need for the analysis that you want to do. All right. Last demo that I want to show you is just combining ontologies with temporal views as well. This is in my way and I can't seem to get it out of the way. So hang on. Okay, I can just drag it and move it over here. So in this particular demo, again, we brought in a lot of different publications. So again, content-based. Again, we used Mesh, which Michael, I think, or James showed earlier. And here, if I were to search for lung disease, which is a mesh concept, and I run that search, I end up with documents that have the concept lung disease in them, and you can see the tag, and yeah, somewhere in this yellow set, there's going to be lung disease that was found, right? But if I go through and look at all of the results, I'm only seeing lung disease. Again, here, if I go ahead and say, well, show me alternative or narrower terms, and then rerun that search, and I had 68 before, and now I have 21. I can see I have pulmonary disease here, and I can see pneumonia here, and no mention of lung disease. So this is again a way to understand the intent of the search and bring that back. In this particular case, we also wanted to keep historical data. So I can say, all right, show me all of let's search through historical data, and I want to look at the historical versions. Historical versions are essentially just different tags against the data. And before I unchecked that, this was 250, and now we're at 289. So you can see the historical versions. You can also go back in time and say, I only want to see stuff from this point on or earlier, or I only want to see stuff from the beginning of time. And that will filter out things that are not meeting the temporal criteria as well. So I think what I've gone through is shown you a lot of different demos and a lot of different ways of thinking about graphs and semantics, and combining that with search, and taking it to help understand and implement the intent of user searches, and make the system a lot smarter than simple token-based searches that are normally done. And I think that's it for demos. I'll hand it back to James.
Wonderful. Thanks, Imran. Again, really interesting and nice to see some practical examples of how all of this comes together in some real world applications. So thank you for that. We're about halfway through what we're going to talk to today. So I'm just going to launch a poll here in the background. So feel free as you're going to fill in the poll and give us some feedback on what you've seen so far and what you'd like to see in the future. And what I'll also do is I'd like to hand over to Susie from 67 Bricks. So we've talked a lot about the technology and the power of MarkLogic to help support you with the smarter content journey. But I thought it'd be really nice to hear from 67 Bricks who are actually supporting customers through this and what they're doing. So Susie, over to you.
Great, thanks, James. Hi, everybody. My name is Susie Crean. I'm Relationships Development Manager for 67 Bricks. We're a data-driven software partner for standards and regulatory organizations and for scholarly publishers. We work closely with MarkLogic and have integrated MarkLogic technology for a number of our customers. So first, just wanted to say thanks to MarkLogic for inviting us to present today. The topic that I'll be talking about is tools for digital acceleration. This presentation is about acceleration from a whole business point of view, rather than being a specific case study or technical discussion. The session objective is to introduce you to our digital transformation toolkit, which we use when helping our customers accelerate change within their business. And the reason why we think this area is important is because the more clients we work with, the more we realize that transformation is not just a change to a company's digital presence or to a piece of their technology, but it's really more about cultural change within the business. And digital transformation is really about business transformation. So before we launch into all of that, I just want to take a moment to tell you a bit about who we are and what it is that we do. 67 Bricks are an award-winning software development partner. We've won a number of awards, but the most recent was earlier this month when we were selected as runner-up in the British Data Awards 2021. The British Data Awards are an annual award celebrating data success stories, and we were nominated in 2 categories, SME of the Year and Professional Services Firm of the Year. And we were the runner-up in the Professional Services category. So those awards are all about data, and we are a data-driven consultancy. And unpicking data challenges is really at the heart of what we do in building data-driven technology solutions, primarily for publishers, but also for B2B information providers, and as mentioned, standards and regulatory organizations. Today, I'm talking mostly about the work that we do for publishers, but we've also applied the tools I'll talk about to other types of organizations. So we have particular expertise in building machine learning and AI capabilities for many of our customers and in developing custom platform solutions for publishers. We're based in Oxford. We have a team of approximately 40 software technologists and publishing experts. Our solutions are built in an agile way, and we're technology agnostic. Although we do have extensive experience with some technologies, like, for example, MarkLogic, and generally we deploy to AWS. But our approach overall is to select the best tools for the job and to make sensible technology decisions based on the individual needs of the publisher and their existing technical capabilities. So where do we fit in when it comes to the digital transformation process? Well, with regards to publishers, often when they come to us, they think they have an idea of where they want to go or where they want to get to, but they're really uncertain how to get there. So that's where we step in as a data-driven software consultancy. We help publishers transform from being essentially print online providers serving up large quantities of content, to becoming digital product companies offering real value to their end users. Most of what we do helps publishers take control over their digital delivery and move away from software as a service type solutions. The publishers we work with, they've already made a transition from offering print products to basically what's a print online product, usually through a vendor platform. And some publishers, quite a few of them, think that that's it, that their digital transformation is complete once their entire corpus is accessible online. But over time, the publishers realized that the print online approach, really following that change is slow, and the platform doesn't really do what they need it to. So vendor platforms that host publisher content, they generally don't support the publisher's ambition to deliver content in new ways, or at least in the new ways that the publisher would like to present the content. So it's hard for them to introduce new business models, and effectively the publisher becomes limited by their technology rather than enabled by it. So that's where we step in. Our goal is really to help publishers take control of their technology. We enable them to build and test new business models and approaches to content delivery. And we help publishers transform from being publishers to becoming product companies. And that means that they're able to offer, support new offerings and unlock new revenue streams. I'm going to talk a little bit about a few examples of how we do this later in the presentation by looking at a couple of projects that we've worked on. But one thing to note is that as a company, we don't sell a product, and we're not interested in selling products. We provide a service, and that service enables the publishers to sell their own products. For this reason, we work on a consultancy basis, usually as an extension to the publisher's own internal business and technology teams, and help guide them through the digital transformation process. Or in cases where clients we work with don't have a technology team, which is still the case in many instances, especially for scholarly publishers. We work as an extension of their business, and effectively we are their technology team. So just quickly, this is a snapshot of some of the publishers we've worked with. We have multiple year ongoing relationships with some of these customers. For example, Emerald Publishing and Royal Society of Chemistry. Our work with standards and regulatory organizations is primarily around building custom machine learning applications for large volume informational databases. This helps them to provide just more useful ways for their end users to access and interact with content. We're small, we're a lean, dynamic, and nimble organization. So we often get involved early on when a company starts their digital transformation process. So we often help publishers work out strategically what products and platforms need to be built and the specific features that they require to support those needs. Being in the business that we're in, we do a lot of thinking about why digital transformation is important. And we closely monitor what's happening in the publishing space. So at the moment, we're seeing 4 key drivers behind the why for digital transformation for publishers. These are different from the 4 talent areas that you see on the slide shown here, but the 4 key drivers for transformation. The first is open access. The governance and technology needed to make content open access has really accelerated a reduction in traditional revenue models, for example, traditional subscription models. And this is driving a need for transformation. Secondly, there's pressure from large technology companies like Google, who are moving in on the publishing space and starting to do so with regard to academic publishing too. The third driver is smaller startups. The new startups founded by digital natives, bringing entirely new understanding of digital and a digital mentality to their businesses from the beginning. That's really rattling publishers and prompting them towards digital transformation. And the fourth driver is that there's an increased understanding and messaging at the leadership level. this messaging is that a digital first approach is important to the survival and success of business. Now, having said that, most publishers and quite a few of the other companies that we work with still see digital transformation as being a task for the IT department. This is why it's probably no surprise to chief information officers that business culture is what holds back digital transformation. One report by an executive search and interim management specialist called the Savannah Group found that 65% of CIOs reported that business culture was the main inhibitor to change. The same report mentioned that 50% of respondents said legacy technologies or business processes were prohibiting transformation. So when we talk to publishers about this kind of wholesale business transformation, we help them to ask the question you see here: what kind of organization do you want to be? What you see under this question are icons symbolizing the different tools that we use to help our customers understand the changes that need to happen. I'm just going to briefly touch on each tool. And collectively, these tools can help the business to accelerate change and move them forward with their transformation projects. We apply the tools on a case-by-case basis because clients come to us with their own unique needs and at different times. Some might come to us before they know what they want or what they need to do. Others come to us once they know what they want, but they haven't started. And then others might come to us when they've started development on a product, but it's not progressing or running efficiently, or they might even come to us when their projects have completely stalled or failed, and we kind of help to put them back on track. So whatever the case, when we work with clients, we draw from this toolkit and help define what's needed to guide the client we're working with to take transformative action. The other thing I wanted to say is that the toolkit doesn't need to be followed in any particular order, but some of the tools can work together and can be used ultimately to build an outcome-driven roadmap, which we'll take a look at later on in the presentation. So yeah, I'm just going to look through each of these different tools. These are just the icons representing them. And this is the list of the case studies that I'm going to draw upon while looking at the transformation tools. Emerald is a scholarly publisher that we helped to become a leading digital-first publisher, and we launched a new delivery platform with them in the autumn of 2019. BMJ, which is transforming into a digital product company, we've worked with them in developing a central content engine using MarkLogic for their best practice and comorbidities products. And De Gruyter, which is an international publisher based in Berlin. They are currently undergoing digital transformation. The first part of that transformation was a new delivery platform, which we launched in February of this year. And we're now working with them on other aspects of whole business transformation. So this slide shows the first tool in our toolkit. This is an approach we use to help publishing clients, and it's based on the Strategizer portfolio management tool. The business model portfolio tool enables the publisher to map their business models to understand where risks and opportunities lie. So it basically shows products based on the risk and return of each product and that product's business model. So effectively what we do with the publisher is categorize each product. So in the top right-hand quadrant are the existing live business models. And in the bottom left, you'll see new products and business ideas. So the idea, once the product is mapped, is to then develop a strategy to move the models up and to the right. Before developing a strategy, though, it's really important to understand the current direction of travel of the different products. Whether a product is increasing or decreasing in terms of risk and in terms of its business model contributes to our analysis when we look at business model portfolio. And really by taking this whole picture view, a publisher can assess if it's got a balanced portfolio, where improvements in digitization might be needed, and where they should focus their time and investment. An example of where we've applied this kind of approach is for Emerald. Emerald first approached 67bricks because they wanted more control of their digital assets. They wanted to build a delivery platform that made researchers and readers' lives easier and wanted to move away from the traditional norms of publishing platforms. But when they first came to us, they had literally hundreds of requirements and hundreds of features that they wanted to include. Their biggest challenge at the time was prioritizing what was important and what to focus on. We helped them to hone in on the use cases that were most important, and this is what we focused on for the initial launch. During the process, Emerald was able to transform its digital operations in order to rapidly respond to user feedback and make use of analytics and data technologies so that the platform could continuously evolve to meet the changing behavior and needs. And again, so that they could focus on what was most important rather than getting distracted by all the features that they initially wanted. And then since the site was launched, and it launched in late 2019, we've continued the agile development process to launch additional features. Now, more than a year on from the initial release, we're engaged with them in a different kind of way. It's a multiple year ongoing strategic planning and implementation project to help them validate and test entirely new business ideas. So another tool that we use from our toolbox is the product value pyramid. This is just a visualization of the tool showing what we aim to do, which is to help publishers move their products up the pyramid. At the bottom level are raw content assets. This might be, for example, the content that sits on a traditional hosted platform. And then at the next level, we talk about making the content more granular, adding data to it to make it smarter. The next level, we're moving away from content items and thinking about what it is that the user needs to know, all the while moving up the data becomes more and more refined to the point where at the top of the pyramid, this is where, based on what we know has happened, we can predict what's going to happen next, and that provides the optimal user experience. So I just have a short case study here for BMJ best practice to show how we've helped them to move up the product value pyramid. When BMJ first came to us, this is their best practice product. It was losing market share. The product was filled with lots of information, but it was buried in a huge corpus of monolithic documents, and unhappy users couldn't easily find what they needed. I mean, basically BMJ best practice was sitting right at the bottom of the product value pyramid. This is a familiar situation for many publishers. They might have a hosted platform from a third-party vendor where even the smallest changes are difficult to make, and they carry a lot of risk. And this means that the publishers can't efficiently develop or improve their product. They basically just have little, or in some cases, no control. In some cases, publishers don't even have their own content, because what happens is it goes directly from the data conversion vendor to the platform vendor. And in order to access their own content, the publishers have to pay high fees for a large data dump or scheduling continuous data dump. And this makes it really difficult and in some cases impossible for the publisher to think about building new products, even if they wanted to. They're basically stuck at the bottom of the pyramid. So here you can see some of the areas that we focused on in our work with BMJ. On a consultancy level, we carried out business analysis of BMJ's requirements and built the technical architecture. BMJ had an XML database in BaseX. The first thing we did in working with them was to compare BaseX with other suppliers. We looked at Exist, MarkLogic, and BaseX, and we made a recommendation for MarkLogic because it was the best tool for the job. We then built a new system using MarkLogic to work with smaller fragments. We implemented a new content model, and the super long monographs that we were working with were broken down into smaller fragments. We did versioning of fragments and introduced an audit trail for changes, and both of these are really important for medical content. And we use MarkLogic for search as well. And the new approach has shown really strong improvements and strong impact for BMJ. On the one hand, the new tool has meant that BMJ can have a more distributed editorial team, which certainly has been really important over the past year with people working remotely. And BMJ have been able to revolutionize their production process, which has led to an 80% increase in capacity and a 40% reduction in costs. These figures are pre-pandemic, so we expect the efficiencies have increased since. And also BMJ have launched another product that uses the underlying system called comorbidities. So on from BMJ, we'll now take a look at capability mapping. Capability mapping is a tool we use to help clients understand what are the kinds of features and products that they want or need to build. We really like this tool because what we've seen amongst the publishers is that they often come to us with a list of capabilities they want. But when we try to understand why they want those capabilities, it's often a response of because that's how others do it, or because that's the way it's always been done. And we really try to turn this thinking around and work with publishers to consider what is the problem that they're trying to solve, or what is it that they really want to achieve. And capability mapping helps them to do that. So our approach at 67 Bricks is always to start by understanding the overall objectives of the business before recommending, designing, or developing any use cases or any technology solution. Throughout the capability mapping process, we use customer experience and qualitative and quantitative data to help us understand and integrate data into the decision making. So at the top of this diagram, you can see the business drivers. We map the business drivers to use cases for features, which you can see on the second tier. And then these are features that would then meet the business needs. And then we map capabilities to the features. And this is what you see on the bottom tier. Mapping the capabilities enables us to work with the publisher to see which capabilities provide the greatest value and which are most critical to the success of the business. We use capability mapping for existing as well as new capabilities. And another important part of this process is thinking about what to say no to, or what to stop doing. And that can be really challenging. And we find that to be the case, especially for publishers who may have already made a lot of investment in something they've already done, or are stuck in a particular mindset of what is important or what's been important in the past. So our next tool in our toolbox is the target architecture diagram. This is a high-level diagram that really just shows our general architectural approach. It's helpful for each publisher to update this for their particular products and workflows. It's amazing to us how many publishers rely on external vendor architectures without having their own vision of their own technical architecture. And often when we start working with publishers, we discover this gap. And we use this diagram as a starting point to define a target architecture for the publisher to own and to move towards. So all of this planning work and the tools we've discussed so far to this point come together whenever we work with a publisher to build a product roadmap. The roadmap is all about visibility and transparency within the organization and is about managing expectation. It's really easy to get distracted, so this is about focusing on what we are going to do. So at the bottom level of our roadmap tool is digitization. This is about turning everything in the customer's business into data. And digitize sits at the bottom of the visualization because it's the data that is going to drive the organization forward, or in this case, upwards, in the road mapping process towards the solution. The next level, improve, is about using the data to enhance and extend the current business models. And then the third level, understand, is about gaining a better understanding of users, what they want to do, how they want to do it. The next level is about the evolution of new business models. This might include introducing new models for innovation, embarking on a product development, or sharing new approaches that help the publisher test and implement new ideas. And then at the top is reshape, and this is about organizational change. It's about suggested approaches for making a commitment to digital transformation and changing the culture of the organization as a whole. And the last tool I wanted to take a look at is related to the roadmap tool, and this is to look at the waves within the roadmap. This is basically applying a build, measure, learn cycle, where the first arrow represents build, the second is measure, and the third is learn. The build, measure, learn process is important because it enables the publisher to build a roadmap that's outcome driven. What is an outcome-driven roadmap? It is, as it says, a way of representing the roadmap based on what the outcome is, rather than what the feature is. An outcome-driven roadmap is based on a goal that the publisher is trying to achieve, rather than the steps or milestones required to achieve that goal. So shifting away from a feature-driven roadmap, which is what most software vendors use, and the vendors who work with publishers use, towards an outcome-driven roadmap, which represents what the publisher needs. This enables the publisher to really digitally transform and empower them to go through that transformation process. An outcome-driven roadmap gives context to the items in the roadmap. Everything in the outcome-driven roadmap is there for a reason, and this we find really helps the other stakeholders in the business who aren't necessarily closely involved in the technology transformation understand why something is there, and it helps the organization as a whole to measure goals and generate new business models across the business. So De Gruyter is our example of an organization that we've helped and that we've been working with to build an outcome-driven roadmap. And this really, using the outcome-driven roadmap has enabled us to manage and prioritize key milestones based on their importance when it comes to achieving an overall objective. It's really by thinking about end goals rather than just the list of deliverables. All the stakeholders at De Gruyter are able to get involved and focus attention on achieving those objectives. Like with capability mapping, this tool also helps to shine a light on features that may be thought of as necessary, but when looked at against the outcomes required, it shows that the features may not necessarily need developing or redeveloping at all. And this has really helped De Gruyter to avoid developing those features that users might not want or that might not be needed going forward, and to avoid making bad product investment choices. So just quickly want to look at what are some of the features on an outcome-driven roadmap. An outcome-driven roadmap has a vision and a goal, and it is, of course, outcome-driven. It's a live working artifact that changes over time. It identifies capabilities, activities, use cases, trial of business ideas, features. It includes clear and measurable milestones mapped against the outcomes. And it identifies a prioritized timeline incorporating the development of new products, services, and capabilities, as well as the improvement of existing products and services. And most critically and importantly, it is the publisher's own roadmap based on their needs and the needs of their business and end users. So that is the end of my presentation. You can see our website and my contact details here. Please do be in touch if you have any questions or wish to discuss how 67Bricks might be able to help your organization accelerate its digital transformation. So thanks everyone for your time. I'll now hand back over to James.
And I think what Susie was talking to really speaks to why we wanted to do this event. Sorry, just move some of these things out my way. I think talking through the process that Susie went through and some of those tools, I think really highlights, how you can get return on investment, where you need to focus your effort, and how you want to prioritize that move and that march towards, digital transformation and accelerating it. I think we know that all our customers are talking about these things and wanting to move in that direction. So we really hope that this series of events has sort of inspired you and given you food for thought. And hopefully we've given you, some ideas about where to move with next in that process. And someone like 67Bricks can obviously help you look at that roadmap and the way forward. So I just want to summarize, what we've covered, where we've gone through in these events. I think the first event, looking at those taxonomies and ontologies, start small. I think that's a really important thing. You don't need to make this too complicated. Get access to a taxonomy tool like Graphify, like MarkLogic, Pool Party, and start to build something out and see how you can take it and where you can go with it. And there really is huge potential there with the ontologies. And then pull it into MarkLogic, and start to relate some data to it and see what you can do. And one of the important pieces of feedback we had from the first event was that people wanted a more technical deep dive. So look out for some invites coming in for an event next month where we'll actually get hands-on and we'll show how to take that taxonomy that we'll build in something like Graphify, how to manage it, how to export it, how to bring it into MarkLogic, and how to start associating it to your content, and looking at things like query expansion, which you saw Imran demoing when he clicked the box and it showed you all the ways that it was expanding the search based on the ontology. Entity extraction, there's some great tools there from DataVid, MarkLogic. There's already tools built inside MarkLogic to help you do that too. So, take a look at some of those existing content that you've got, how we can classify it, how you can add the entities to it, and the value that brings you. And hopefully, today's sparked lots of ideas, different ways that you can use the knowledge graphs and maybe things you hadn't considered before. So we really hope this has been useful. Please do fill in the poll and give us some feedback. We really appreciate it, and give us some direction on where you want to go next. And if there's anything you've missed from this session or previous sessions, reach out to us at csm@marklogic.com, and we're happy to send you recordings so you can go back and review everything. Philip, I'm not sure if we've had any Q&A come through on the chat. But if not, if anybody's got any questions, please do feel free to come off mute and ask away.
We did have one question come across, which was sort of exploring use cases elsewhere in the scientific community, not just within pharma, but actually involved in sort of nuclear physics or materials research. And we've got a couple of customers that we do that with, taking sort of large sensor data as well as unstructured content and combining that to help them with their research to find findings quicker. So yeah, there was some pointed questions on that. There is a link actually to one of the use cases that I'll put into the chat window that was quite interesting, which was our work with the Livermore National Laboratory, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. So if you're interested on that one, then please do check that out. Apart from that, that was about it.
Yeah, and I would say, we've touched on pharma and life sciences, but we've got lots of customers in lots of verticals. So if there's something here that you think is interesting, please do reach out to us. There's lots of other stuff we can talk about that perhaps we can't always share on a WebEx, but lots of other practical things that we can give insight to in other areas. So if you are working on something, please do reach out.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, we definitely have very large chemical companies using us in a very similar way to pharma. I'm working with some of the largest ones. And we also have large food companies that are working in a similar sort of R&D manner.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate your time. Thank you for staying with us. And yeah, we hope to see you all at our next event.